What if Master Yoda found the Death Star plans on Geonosis? What would happen then? We pick up with Obi-Wan and Anakin as they rush toward Dooku in his hangar on Geonosis. Let's begin. The hangar's environmental systems hummed against Geonosis' oppressive heat as Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker entered. Count Dooku stood near his solar sailor, his posture suggesting disorientation rather than calculated menace. The former Jedi Master's eyes held a vacant quality that lent credence to intelligence reports of cognitive decline. "You'll pay for all the Jedi you killed today, Dooku," Anakin declared, his borrowed lightsaber aimed at the elderly man who merely stared in response, swaying slightly on his feet like someone who'd forgotten why they'd entered a room. Dooku's mind seemed to latch onto words individually, pay registering first. "How much do I owe you?" He patted his belt absently, apparently searching for a wallet. Hours earlier, as preparations began for the execution of 3 humans by wild beasts, an event Dooku was visibly excited to witness, the thrill of anticipation made him forget his medication schedule entirely. His caretaker droid had issued several reminders, but Dooku, too enthralled by the impending execution, waved them away without a thought. This lapse led to the severe cognitive deterioration now manifesting in the hangar. Obi-Wan stepped beside Anakin. "We'll kill him together. You go in slowly on the left. I'm killing him now," Anakin roared. The younger Jedi's bloodlust saturated the Force, his entire body trembling with excitement at the prospect of murdering a senior citizen. As Anakin charged from the far end of the hangar, his battle cry echoed off the walls, a primal sound that penetrated even Dooku's fog. The screaming reminded the Count of the predators in Serenos jungles, dangerous beasts he'd taken to hunting after leaving the Order. This connection sparked recognition. This wasn't some bank employee here to collect overdue loans. This was a threat running straight at him. His hands knew there should be something on his belt for defense, though the specifics escaped him. His fingers closed on the first object they found, something small and disc-shaped. He pressed the activation stud. A red hologram emanated from it. Nothing more. Perhaps some form of grenade? With Anakin nearly upon him, Dooku hurled the disc directly at his attacker's face with surprising force. Anakin's single-minded focus on geriatric homicide proved his undoing. The projectile struck his temple with a metallic ring, sending him falling backward immediately. The borrowed lightsaber spun upward from his loosening grip. The last thing he saw was the green plasma blade arcing down toward him before his skull slammed against the durasteel floor. Consciousness fled on impact. The spinning saber completed its descent, severing his right arm below the elbow before dropping beside him and deactivating. Obi-Wan's disapproval manifested as a slow headshake, but at least now he could eliminate this elderly man without sharing the fun with Anakin. "Anakin, no," he called out belatedly to the unconscious form. There, duty as a master fulfilled. With that out of the way, the Jedi advanced with his lightsaber raised in what he considered an optimal dismemberment stance. Dooku, meanwhile, stood staring at the unconscious Anakin. Then his unfocused eyes drifted to Obi-Wan. Some surviving neural pathway whispered a warning. Predators on Sereno often hunted in packs. If one threat had fallen, surely others remained. His hands returned to his belt, still searching for that defensive tool. Something red? He couldn't remember. Obi-Wan began closing the distance, savoring each step. Dooku's fingers continued their search. At 3 meters away, Obi-Wan raised his blade higher, eyes locked on his first target, Dooku's knees. The sequence played out in his mind. Legs at the knees, arms at the elbows, perhaps some judicious application of flame to finish. Lost in these pleasant contemplations, blinded by bloodlust just as his apprentice had been, and his master before him, Obi-Wan failed to notice when Dooku's fingers finally found his lightsaber. The Count's fingers closed on the cylinder but couldn't manage to unclip it from where it hung upside down on his belt. He gripped it tightly while it dangled there, twisting and turning it. What was he supposed to do now? His fingers found buttons along the sides. Yes, he was supposed to press one of these. Obi-Wan was nearly upon him, blade poised for the strike, when Dooku's thumb finally found the activation stud, his death grip keeping the weapon rigid even while it remained inverted on his belt. The crimson blade ignited downward at nearly a 45-degree angle directly into Obi-Wan's right thigh just as he committed to his strike. The sudden snap, hiss, and burst of red light startled Dooku, making him stumble backward, inadvertently dragging the blade across Obi-Wan's thigh muscle. The contact lasted perhaps half a second, leaving a burn no worse than touching a hot cooking surface. But Obi-Wan collapsed as if struck by lightning, his saber falling from his grip and deactivating as he rolled across the hangar floor. His howls mirrored the recorded shrieks of giant Kashyyyk spiders Yoda had Mandalorians brutally slaughter on Holovid, part of an ever-growing private archive he refused to explain. Dooku stared at the screaming Jedi with genuine concern. Why was he screaming? What had happened? Who was this man? Where was he? Dooku's caretaker droid emerged from the Solar Sailor's boarding ramp before Dooku could hurt himself. "Count Dooku, your medication schedule requires immediate attention." The droid carefully extracted the inverted weapon from Dooku's loose grip and deactivated it. "We must depart." The droid gently guided him toward the ship, away from the Jedi writhing on the floor. Dooku offered no resistance once the droid calmly assured him the writhing man was not in mortal danger. Obi-Wan's performance continued, the result of legitimate pain hypersensitivity. The condition, clinically identified as opioid-induced hyperalgesia, had left his nervous system so destabilized that even minor stimuli registered as acute, incapacitating pain. His theatrical writhing resembled the infamous incident from last season's Coruscant shockball finals when Gross Mantell collapsed after an opponent's fingertip grazed his shoulder pad. Mantell had a reputation for such dramatics, constantly attempting to draw crimson cards against the opposing team, though it never once fooled the officials. But on that occasion, his antics struck a nerve. The player Mantell had tried to bait, already under scrutiny for disciplinary issues, marched back across the field and stomped on Mantell's face, declaring he would give him something real to cry about. Mantell sprang to his feet, miraculously recovered, and tackled his attacker. The benches cleared, fans flooded the field. What began as petty theatrics escalated into the largest full-scale riot in HoloNet sporting history, broadcast live to over 17 billion viewers. The event achieved the highest ratings recorded in over a century. Authorities, citing the need to avoid further escalation, declined to intervene until well after the crowd had dispersed, though internal memos later revealed concerns about interrupting a peak viewership window. Master Yoda arrived moments later, but like Anakin and Obi-Wan, Yoda too was blinded, though in his case his vision was clouded by severe myopia that had worsened dramatically with age. He refused corrective glasses, claiming they made him look like a simpleton, and contact lenses because apparently they made his eyeballs itchy. Consequently, from where he stood at the hangar entrance, Yoda could barely distinguish anything clearly. The two forms sprawled on the floor in the center of the vast hangar, registered as distant blurry shapes, one motionless, one rolling and screaming. The Solar Sailor to his left, perhaps 10 meters away, appeared as nothing more than a large metallic blur with moving shadows that might have been people. Dooku, however, recognized Yoda immediately. Without his medication, the Count couldn't remember what year it was, let alone current allegiances. "Master," he called softly, moving toward the familiar green figure. Yoda heard the voice but couldn't see its source. He reached out through the Force to compensate for his failing eyes, but before he could locate Dooku, the caretaker droid intervened. "That is not your master. We must depart immediately." The droid guided Dooku back into the ship and closed the entrance. By the time Yoda's Force senses registered Dooku's confused presence, the Solar Sailor was already lifting off. The Grand Master stood there, annoyed at missing his target. Obi-Wan's performance continued unabated. Yoda walked toward the familiar wailing. He'd recognize Obi-Wan's theatrical suffering anywhere. The Master approached and poked his gut with his Geimer stick. "Obi-Wan, stop this nonsense, you must. Or catch this saber, you will." The threat somewhat calmed Obi-Wan, though he continued rolling. Padme Amidala rushed in with a contingent of clone troopers, shouting, "Anakin!" Yoda recognized her voice and briefly considered greeting her, then remembered she'd completely ignored him a few days earlier on Coruscant, after he'd expressed joy at her survival. Better to say nothing. Padme located Anakin's unconscious form, grabbed his severed arm, and attempted to shake him awake. When that failed, she delivered a kick to his ribs. "Wake up, Anakin. We need to reattach this." She held the limb with the casual air of someone returning a borrowed hydrospanner. Anakin screamed upon waking, immediately registering the missing hand. Yoda, already fed up after Obi-Wan's earlier theatrics, snapped, "Skywalker, shut up you must. Go smoke some rhydonium instead of ruining my eardrums." Medical teams converged on the hangar, evacuating both wounded Jedi with professional swiftness. While technicians and clones processed the scene for evidence, Yoda wandered the perimeter, seeking respite from the noise. His foot struck something metallic near where Anakin had fallen. He glanced down. Thankfully, things that close still came into focus. The device's sleek design and chrome finish suggested cutting-edge holopad technology, precisely the sort of gadget he'd been coveting. He secured it within his robes without hesitation. Back at the temple, Yoda dismissed the erupting clone wars with casual indifference. Wars came and went like seasonal allergies. He'd cross that bridge when he came to it, or more likely have someone else cross it for him, as was tradition. Instead, he retreated to his quarters and donned his prescription glasses, the ones he wore only in absolute privacy. From within his robes, he produced the sleek chrome device he'd acquired near Anakin's unconscious body. His attempts to activate it yielded only a holographic sphere of indeterminate purpose. Naturally, he contacted Anakin, his designated technical consultant. Anakin informed him that he was going to Naboo to secretly marry Senator Amidala, and couldn't help at the moment. Yoda concocted an immediate excuse to accompany Anakin to Naboo, something about Jedi marriages requiring proper oversight to ensure ceremonial compliance, or perhaps that Anakin needed proper representation from his side of the family. The truth was simpler. He wanted his new technology operational, and Naboo's royal events guaranteed premium alcohol. Anakin agreed, and Yoda came with him to Naboo. The wedding itself proved intimate. C-3PO, R2, a hired officiant, and one semi-conscious Grandmaster who'd gotten into the wine a little too early. After the ceremony, Anakin shook Yoda awake for the holo photo session. Once the photos were taken, Yoda promptly wandered off in search of more alcohol, and nearly walked straight into a tree, prompting Anakin to intercept him, gently place his glasses on his face, and reassure him, "No one's judging here, Master." C-3PO then helpfully pointed toward the estate. "The alcohol is inside Master Yoda," he said. The group walked and rolled toward what generously passed for a reception hall, a quiet sitting room with alcohol and poor judgment in abundance. As they settled into post-wedding celebrations, the DJ droid launched into Naboo's premier party playlist, starting with the Niamos Club remix. As Yoda drank, he remembered the powdered Luna extract he'd brought as a wedding present. "Luna extract, mixed with drinks, we should. Enhances the experience, it does," he announced, rummaging through his robes. But instead of the powder, his fingers found the disc, the entire reason for his intrusion. Memory sparked. He presented it to Anakin, who gave it to 3PO, who simply directed R2 to examine it. The astromech's findings transformed the celebration's atmosphere entirely. R2-D2 beeped and whistled in a flurry that left Anakin and Padme staring in shock, while Yoda looked increasingly confused. "Speak basic, you will. Understand primitive beeping." "I do not," Yoda said to R2. Anakin summarized what R2 had found. The disc contained authentic schematics for a planet-destroying superweapon, codenamed Death Star. Its construction and destructive capability were laid out in brutal detail, enough to annihilate entire worlds. As Anakin finished, Yoda blinked at the hologram and muttered, "Some wedding gift I brought, C-3PO, sensing the shift in mood, discreetly signaled the DJ droid to lower the volume. "Where did you acquire this?" Anakin demanded, turning to Yoda. Yoda considered, then nodded. "Found it near where you lay unconscious, I did. After the fighting ended, in the hangar." Anakin frowned, piecing things together. He remembered Dooku hurling something at him during the chaos. Some small object that struck him before he lost consciousness. Wait, I think Dooku threw something at me. This must be it. Yoda's eyes widened as the realization clicked. Padme glanced between them, incredulous. He just threw plans for a planet killer at you? That doesn't make any sense. Severe mental problems, Dooku always had, Yoda mused, even before leaving the Order. Could not tell left from orange at times. Scared of your high midi-chlorian count, he must have been. Threw whatever was in reach, forgetting what it was, then fled he did. The explanation satisfied them, in the peculiar way that absurdity becomes acceptable after sufficient alcohol. "So what should we do with this?" Anakin asked. "Destroy it?" "No!" Padme and Yoda shouted simultaneously, startling the protocol droid. Yoda leaned forward, channeling his most persuasive persona. "Anakin, why not use this weapon? Long has the Jedi maintained peace in the galaxy. By the blood of our Order are these systems kept safe. Let us use it against tyranny." Padme's eyes lit up with unmistakable ambition. She began pacing, her mind already racing with logistics and strategy. "Yes, Master Yoda, let's use it. But you can't do this alone. You'll need allies in the Senate, political cover, logistical support. I have the contacts, the wealth, the political machinery. You will need it." Yoda nodded enthusiastically. "Political help? Yes. Necessary. It is." Anakin stood frozen, watching as two of the most important people in his life casually planned a galactic superweapon rollout like it was a vacation to Mustafar. Padme was already talking about supply chains. Yoda mentioned potential Jedi site managers. It was all happening so fast with terrifyingly little hesitation. Then Padme seized both his hands, her eyes burning with revolutionary fervor. "You've always wanted to make real change, Anakin. To end slavery, to bring justice. This weapon makes it possible. Democracy has failed. You've seen it yourself. The Senate debates while people suffer. The bureaucracy protects the powerful while the weak die forgotten. True power, concentrated in the hands of those who actually care about justice. That's what the galaxy needs, not endless committees and corrupted votes." Besides, Yoda added, backed up to his holodrive, Dooku's plans surely are. Construct their own version, the Separatists will. Create ours first. We must. How would we even build something like this? Anakin asked weakly, already knowing he'd lost the argument. The logistics discussion that followed revealed surprising resources at their disposal. The Jedi Order's various financial ventures, accumulated over millennia of creative bookkeeping, provided substantial funding. Padme's Senate allies, particularly Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, possessed wealth that dwarfed small planetary economies. Labor presented no obstacle. On Kashyyyk, Yoda's fanatic Wookiee and Ewok converts believed that processing Lunaweed and narcotics for the Holy Jedi Order guaranteed paradise. They would work themselves to death for this project if asked. Add droids and the newly acquired clone army, and construction became surprisingly feasible. Engineers to assist, the Order has many, Yoda affirmed, adjusting the spectacles perched precariously on his nose, his tone surprisingly zealous. But Chief Engineer young Skywalker will be. His reasoning for the selection, however, lay in considerations perhaps less grand than pure strategic foresight. Skywalker's formidable midi-chlorian count, surpassing even his own, warranted the choice. That, and his proven knack for wrangling the temple's ubiquitous data printers and view monitors. Surely, Yoda mused with an internal, self-assured nod, this new undertaking posed little greater challenge. Skywalker offered no immediate refusal, though a quiet, "This is insane," escaped his lips. Nevertheless, the project's sheer, audacious scope resonated with a nascent ambition he rarely acknowledged. For the sane, revolution is not, Yoda rasped, punctuating the declaration by sharply inhaling a pinch of the Luna powder he carried. A moment later, apparently recalling its intended use as a beverage additive rather than an inhalant, he drew his nearby drink up through his nostrils with an abrupt, force-assisted snort. Anakin averted his gaze, his eyes inadvertently falling upon Padme's wedding gift, his own severed hand cryogenically preserved within a translucent stasis casing, a permanent, grisly relic of Geonosis. Later that very day, the conspiracy expanded. The full Jedi Council assembled alongside carefully selected allies, Obi-Wan, still limping dramatically, Padme's inner circle, Bail and Mon, no others had the necessary wealth and influence, and a few trusted associates. They convened in the same Lake Country estate, where Anakin and Padme had married just hours earlier, now hastily repurposed as a provisional war room. Together they drafted a comprehensive plan, coordinate covert funding, mass construction behind the Clone Wars, and ultimately overthrow the Republic. First, however, the schematics made one thing clear. Geonosians had designed the weapon for Dooku. Thus, seizing Geonosis and its native scientists became the immediate priority. The plan was set in motion. Through careful coordination, Bail Organa deployed Alderaan royal military vessels to covertly bombard the sparsely inhabited western hemisphere of Geonosis, creating radioactive contamination across vast desert regions. Bail's targeting wasn't motivated by mercy. They needed the populated eastern regions intact for construction labor, and couldn't afford to contaminate the areas where Geonosian workers would be forced to operate. The strikes were disguised as the result of previous separatist mining operations, claiming that unstable industrial equipment had finally failed catastrophically, releasing toxic materials that had been building up over time. With authentic radiation readings from the devastated hemisphere to support their claims, Padme's political maneuvering easily pushed through Senate emergency legislation declaring Geonosis both a protected nature preserve and a biohazard zone, framing the Republic as heroically protecting the surviving Geonosians from further separatist industrial disasters. The legislation restricted access to the region to only those with special authorization, while oversight of the containment operation was naturally entrusted to the heroic Jedi, the only ones deemed qualified and selfless enough to risk exposure for the sake of protecting innocent beings, and capable of properly dealing with any unauthorized individuals who might accidentally breach the quarantine zone. The Separatists denied responsibility for the irradiation, but showed little interest in investigating, assuming the primitive bugs must have done something catastrophically idiotic to irradiate their own planet. They dismissed the Jedi and Republic quarantine as typical naivety, wasting resources to protect some backward, contaminated desert where they couldn't even establish profitable droid factories anymore. Poggle the Lesser found the whole situation suspicious and wanted to investigate, but when he decided to move forward with a section of his droid army to probe the quarantine, Newt Gunray had him killed by hired Trandoshan assassins who devoured the evidence. Gunray refused to waste credits on worthless bug creatures when there were profitable worlds to exploit instead. The Jedi had no way of knowing about this convenient elimination. but it left them with a perfectly isolated construction site, hidden from prying eyes by legal protections and separatist indifference. Ki-Adi-Mundi volunteered to oversee Geonosian labor management. His methods proved effective. Flamethrower-wielding clone units and bloodthirsty Wookiee warriors provided compelling motivation. The native population, threatened with extinction, discovered unprecedented productivity. The Ewoks, when not consuming the occasional Geonosian who underperformed, contributed their own primitive enthusiasm to the project. Basic component manufacturing occurred planetside, while specialized droids handled space-based assembly under Jedi supervision. Workers at every level, clone troopers, junior Jedi and engineers, were told they were constructing a mobile Jedi temple, a secret project that required absolute discretion. Only those at the very top of the conspiracy and their most trusted allies knew the full scope of what they were actually building. The Clone Wars offered perfect cover for the staggering resource diversion. Under different circumstances, slower eras marked by bureaucracy, political sabotage, and clashing priorities, a project of this scale would have stalled for decades. But the Jedi moved with terrifying efficiency. Anakin's engineering brilliance, combined with Force-enhanced insights and 25 millennia of accumulated galactic knowledge, accelerated construction beyond what any other power could have achieved. The project encountered only one significant delay: the requirement for deep substrate foliated calcite, found exclusively in Gorman's deep underground rock formations. The peaceful planet, famous for its mountain vistas and luxury textile industry based on spider silk Gorman twill, presented a delicate problem. Yoda devised an elegant solution. The Jedi established a temple on Gorman, immediately cratering planetary property values. Using coordinated force suggestion on a planetary scale, they convinced the population that vengeful spirits haunted their world. Terrified and desperate to leave, the Gormans were receptive when the Jedi offered generous buyouts funded by the conspiracy's bottomless coffers. But they still needed somewhere to relocate. "But where do we move them?" Mon Mothma asked during a strategy session. "A moon in the Endor system," Yoda said. "Abundant space there is." The native Ewok population posed a small complication. Yoda already had sufficient Ewok fanatics in his zealous workforce. The remaining population on Endor was simply redundant. He discreetly contracted a military firm under a budget line labeled Pest Control. To cover the operation, the Jedi leaked reports of ancient predators awakening on the forest moon. With help from Senate allies, they had the entire system temporarily classified as a hazard zone, mirroring the earlier quarantine on Geonosis. The designation ensured no investigative bodies, press, or relief agencies could legally approach the moon. After a brief theatrical battle, the Jedi emerged victorious, but with tragic news. The mysterious predators had already killed all the Ewoks before they could intervene. Such a terrible loss, the now cleared moon was offered to the traumatized Gormans as a compassionate gesture. "The Gormans must not be abandoned," Yoda insisted later, adjusting his spectacles with great sincerity. "They're luxury garments. Appreciate them, I do." With calcite secured and Gorman completely strip-mined, construction proceeded without further delays. The Jedi's environmental facade proved masterful. Gorman became the third world that Padme and her allies had declared either a biohazard zone or a nature reserve, following Jedi recommendations. Environmental agencies across the galaxy praised the Order's sudden ecological consciousness. 3 years after acquiring Dooku's plans, the Superlaser achieved operational status. Though the station remained incomplete, it possessed functional weapons, shields, and crew quarters sufficient for their purposes. The remaining construction didn't require Geonosian expertise. For their contributions to design and construction, the Geonosians would receive their final gift: liberation from their miserable existence. The planet, conveniently isolated and expendable, made the perfect test subject. Should anyone in the Senate care to inquire, they'd be informed that separatist deep mining operations had destabilized the planetary core, causing catastrophic geological failure. Not that the Senate would matter much longer. The test firing drew all conspirators to the station's observation deck: Director Skywalker and Senator Amidala, Ahsoka, the Jedi's formidable child soldier, the full Jedi Council, Mon Mothma and Bail Organa, along with their Senate financiers, select clone commanders who understood the truth, minor Jedi accomplices, and Chewbacca representing Wookiee interest. Through the main viewport, Geonosis hung like a red wound against the void. Yoda's dedication speech deteriorated into excited babbling before he simply declared, "Blow up Geonosis, we must." Ki-Adi-Mundi accepted the honor of initiation. Geonosis had been his to oversee and abuse. "Target locked," a clone technician reported. "Fire," Mundi commanded with unseemly enthusiasm. The super laser carved through space, a pillar of coherent destruction that struck Geonosis with divine fury. The planet's crust cracked like an egg, exposing the molten core for a breathtaking instant before the entire world detonated. Fragments scattered outward in an expanding sphere of annihilation, glowing like a billion funeral pyres for the extinct Geonosians. Before them, the destruction painted the void in impossible colors. Molten planetary core created ribbons of gold and crimson against the darkness, while vaporized metals produced clouds of emerald and sapphire that expanded like a cosmic flower blooming in fast forward. Chunks of continental crust tumbled through space, still glowing white-hot, creating their own miniature meteor showers as smaller debris impacted their surfaces. "Perhaps we should have gotten married here," Anakin mused, squeezing Padme's hand. "Better photos than Naboo's waterfalls." Padme laughed affectionately, leaning into him. "Next time we destroy a planet, I'll wear my wedding dress." The observation deck erupted in celebration. Conspirators clapped and screamed their approval, the successful test validating years of criminal enterprise and enslaved labor. Mon Mothma waved to the DJ droid to begin the destruction party they'd planned, but before the first beat could drop, Rex's voice cut through the revelry. "Generals, urgent transmission from Coruscant. Chancellor Palpatine has been kidnapped by General Grievous. Massive battle in progress over the capital. The invisible hand is unable to jump to hyperspace." Mon Mothma halted the DJ droid mid-track. "The what this is?" Yoda demanded, annoyed at the interruption to their celebration. "Ruining our moment, they are." Rex elaborated on the intelligence. Grievous had apparently executed an elaborate kidnapping scheme, but something had gone wrong with their escape. Republic forces had engaged, creating chaos above Coruscant. None of the conspirators felt particular concern for Palpatine. Padme had thoroughly convinced Anakin that the Chancellor was nothing more than a manipulative politician exploiting him for HoloNet publicity, so even Anakin cared little. But Anakin's strategic mind immediately recognized the opportunity. "This is perfect," he announced, eyes alight with possibility. "The timing couldn't be better." The others listened as he outlined the acceleration of their existing plan. They'd intended to present the Death Star as a separatist superweapon eventually, but Palpatine's kidnapping created the ideal scenario. Their appearance over Coruscant during an active battle would cement the narrative. Who would question that this massive weapon belonged to the faction currently attacking the capital? "Functional enough the station is," Yoda agreed. The plan had always been sophisticated in its deception. Present the weapon as a separatist superweapon, attacking the capital, threaten the Senate into removing Palpatine, ensure Bail's succession through their prearranged political machinery, then the Jedi would heroically capture the weapon from the separatists. With justification established, they could threaten separatist worlds into submission while discreetly draining their war resources, gradually transforming the Republic into their vision of order. Multiple Death Stars ensuring compliance across the galaxy. "We wanted to wait until construction was complete," Mon Mothma noted, "but this opportunity is too perfect to waste," Bail finished. "A separatist attack already in progress? Our arrival will seem like part of their plan." "One Republic ship, destroy we must," Yoda suggested, his prescription glasses compensating for failing eyesight. Vanity be damned, he had refused to miss the Geonosis test. Credibility establish it will. Anakin turned to Rex. "Set course for Coruscant, Captain." The conspirators raised their glasses in a final toast as stars began to elongate outside the viewport. They were seizing control ahead of schedule, but the galaxy had practically gift-wrapped the perfect excuse. "To overthrowing the government," Obi-Wan called, raising his glass with theatrical flair.
"To justice through superior firepower,"
Chewbacca's translator added, his voice flat, the sentiment anything but. The Death Star entered hyperspace, carrying its cargo of warrior monks, corrupt politicians, and galaxy-changing weapons toward their date with destiny. Behind them, Geonosis' remains continued their eternal expansion, a glowing testament to Jedi efficiency. Aboard the Invisible Hand, Palpatine stood in the observation deck, gazing at the raging battle above Coruscant. Republic cruisers traded broadsides with separatist warships in a rolling ballet of fire and wreckage. He didn't flinch at the explosions. He didn't sit. He had no need to feign helplessness, now with the Jedi taking their sweet time to arrive. Behind him, Count Dooku had long since slumped into the only chair, chin resting on his chest, snoring softly. Palpatine didn't bother waking him. What was the point? He'd grown weary of the whole circus. For years, he'd kept this absurd machine operational, ensuring Dooku maintained his medication regimen, stopping Grievous from blowing himself up, perpetually bribing Newt Gunray into silence, and managing 2,000 corrupt senators. each more inept than the one before. The Jedi, meanwhile, presumably distracted by their cartel enterprises in the Outer Rim, continued their unpredictable and disruptive maneuvers. Sometimes he dreamed of fading into the Force, just vanishing. No more scheming, no more Dooku, no more Senate, no more Padme Amidala, that smug, slippery little witch who had stolen Anakin's loyalty like a thief in the night. The thought of her ignited fury in his veins, but the heat died instantly, replaced by a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Through the Force, he felt it approaching, peril, swift and inevitable. Below, on the command bridge, General Grievous paced amid the Neimoidian officers. Suddenly, a junior navigator straightened, voice trembling. "General, we're detecting a massive object emerging from hyperspace." The thing that materialized defied comprehension, a sphere of metal and menace that evoked the half-consumed worlds from ancient children's tales, where cosmic leviathans prowled the void between stars, leaving planetary corpses scarred by impossible teeth. It loomed over their pitiful battle, dwarfing every Republic and Separatist vessel combined. Detector arrays became redundant. The monstrosity filled viewports across both fleets, its presence undeniable and terrifying. Grievous stared through the bridge's main viewport, his mechanical breathing hitching. He activated his comlink with trembling fingers. Meanwhile, in the observation deck, Sidious stood transfixed, his eyes locked on the same weapon he had dreamed of constructing. Was he dreaming? No, this was a nightmare made manifest. Dooku's comlink crackled to life. The Count jerked awake, blinking in confusion as Grievous's urgent voice left his comlink speaker. "Dooku, you must see this. The Republic has deployed some kind of moon-sized battle station." Dooku stood up and looked around groggily. "What do you mean, General?" Sidious grabbed him by the shoulders and spun him toward the viewport, the comlink clattering to the floor. Through the fallen device, Grievous's voice crackled with confusion and growing alarm as Sidious pointed at the massive station. "The Republic has our superweapon," he snarled with fury. "Oh," Dooku said, his eyes widening as recognition dawned. Then his medication-addled mind grasped for explanations. "They must have hacked something, stolen our designs somehow." Palpatine's composure shattered. Through the Force, he reached out toward the massive station and sensed the familiar presences aboard. Jedi Masters, senators he recognized, all radiating satisfaction and deadly intent. "How is this possible?" he demanded. Dooku's confused mumbling provided no answers. Palpatine's panic sharpened into desperate resolve. He didn't know what the Jedi and senators were planning, but from what he could sense, through the Force, it was nothing good. He could not risk waiting around to find out. The Jedi were already a threat, and now they possessed a planet killer. A small silver lining emerged through his fury. This could easily make them appear as traitors to the Republic. Constructing a planet killer obviously provided legal ammunition for Order 66. Still, anger consumed him for underestimating the Jedi and missing the scheming they had obviously conducted in the Outer Rim. Palpatine's mind snapped into focus. He seized Dooku by the shoulders, shaking him. "The long-range communications. Where are they on this ship?" Dooku blinked slowly, his confused mind struggling to focus. "Communications, down somewhere. Lower levels, I think. Near the bridge, maybe." He waved a hand in the general direction of the corridor. Palpatine knew it was pointless to question Dooku further. He released the confused Count and sprinted from the observation deck, his robes billowing as he navigated the ship's passages toward where the bridge might house a long-range transmitter. Behind him, Dooku squinted at the massive station, trying to process what he was seeing. Meanwhile, on the station's command bridge, Yoda ordered a minimal power test to show their intent. "Lowest setting only," he specified. "That Republic destroyer, worth little those clones are. Die for a greater cause, they will." The target vessel vaporized instantly, reduced to component atoms. The conspirators erupted in excited cheers at their weapon's effectiveness. Mon Mothma, caught up in the euphoria, suggested another demonstration. Anakin's eyes lit up. "How about a surface demonstration? Some abandoned sector," the director asked. The group cheered their approval. Even Mace Windu nodded gravely as Anakin ordered a second demonstration, this time on the surface. The superlaser pivoted toward an abandoned section of Coruscant's industrial district known as the Works, the vast burned-out manufacturing zone that had been shuttered for decades. Another minimal burst reduced several square kilometers of empty factories and refineries to molten slag. The revolutionaries knew that even these demonstrations would have martyrs in the path to what they called freedom, but they weren't worried about anyone they cared for because their preparations had been thorough. Months earlier, anticipating the inevitable overthrow, they had begun the slow evacuation process. Anyone who mattered had already been relocated from Coruscant, the exodus gradual and subtle to avoid suspicion. No alarms raised as their allies quietly disappeared to safer worlds. The capital stood vacant of anyone important to those aboard the station. Even the Jedi Temple operated on skeleton staff, with Yoda having deployed the younglings to active battlefields to ensure their safety during the takeover. A reprogrammed tactical droid broadcast their pre-prepared ultimatum, demanding Palpatine's removal and claiming he was responsible for this destructive war. They came in peace, the recording stated, but would destroy the planet if not obeyed. The Security Council capitulated within 5 minutes. Palpatine was stripped of power, and through prearranged political machinery, Bail Organa assumed the chancellorship. The conspirators celebrated again, toasting their bloodless coup. But moments before they could disable Palpatine's Chancellor authorization codes, he had found that long-range transmitter and executed Order 66. The Jedi sensed betrayal rippling through the Force. Across the galaxy, the Order broadcast into clone helmet communications. In the Death Star's command center, the skeleton crew of clones opened fire. Jedi reflexes deflected every bolt back at their attackers, but Rex's final desperate shot, before dying, ricocheted off Anakin's blade directly into the weapons control console. The undertested interfaces crosswired catastrophically, feedback loops destabilized power regulators, damaged circuits bypassed targeting parameters, and cascading system failures rippled through interconnected subsystems. Months of rigorous testing would have exposed these vulnerabilities, but the sudden opportunity had forced them to act before the weapon was truly ready. The Jedi's absolute faith in their Force awareness had made redundant safeguards seem unnecessary luxuries. One compromised console commanded the entire weapon system, and now that overconfidence proved fatal. The super laser fired at maximum output, its targeting locked on the galactic capital. Coruscant's annihilation was instantaneous. The super laser struck the Ecumenopolis, and the entire planet simply ceased to exist in a brilliant explosion. Unlike Geonosis' rocky destruction, the vaporized metals created a spectacular light show. Copper blazing emerald, durasteel flashing silver white, and countless alloys contributing ribbons of gold, crimson, and azure that expanded outward in a perfect sphere of luminous death. From the bridge where he'd slaughtered every droid, Neimoidian, and even Grievous to reach the communications array, Palpatine watched the kaleidoscope of destruction race toward the invisible hand. The wall of multicolored plasma approached with mathematical certainty. He closed his eyes, a strange peace settling over him. Well, he murmured as death claimed him with casual indifference. Meanwhile, Dooku was still standing by the massive viewport in the observation deck. His mind registered the approaching brilliant light as sunrise on Sereno. Beautiful morning, he mumbled contentedly, and died with a smile as the rainbow fire consumed him. The Death Star maintained safe distance from Coruscant, its shields easily absorbing the harmless radiation that reached them across the void. Aboard the station, the conspirators watched in stunned silence as debris fields expanded where the galactic capital once orbited. The metal-rich remnants created a spectacular nebula, glowing with residual heat and exotic radiation. In the oppressive quiet, the DJ droid suddenly floated into the observation deck and began blasting pulsing club music, apparently thinking this was the huge event they'd been planning for. The electronic beats thundered through the chamber, while an alien vocalist's otherworldly throat singing created haunting harmonies that seemed to mock the magnitude of what they'd witnessed. Chewbacca tumbled to the floor in shock, simply overwhelmed by witnessing the destruction of 2 trillion lives. The Jedi, however, felt the Force screaming with those deaths, and for some weird reason, so did Jar Jar, who was holding a drink off to the side and suddenly looked very uncomfortable. The music blared on, no one moved to stop it. After what felt like hours, Bail finally spoke over the alien wailing. This was not our fault. The assembly nodded in eager agreement, launching into a cascade of justifications. The clones had turned on them. Rex's shot had caused the malfunction. They'd tried to use minimal power. Palpatine had forced their hand. Coruscant was mostly suffering anyway. They'd ended that suffering. Each excuse built upon the last, as if they were trying to convince themselves, voices rising over panic attacks and desperate rationalizations. Finally, Yoda ordered rhydonium gas pumped through the ventilation system. The narcotic haze calmed frayed nerves and settled their collective guilt. The dead were one with the Force now, or whatever. Besides, the clones turning on them had caused this whole mess. Time to move forward. Bail Organa, newly appointed Chancellor, now trapped aboard the Death Star, immediately accessed his code cylinders, fortunately upgraded with full Chancellor authorization by the Security Council before Coruscant's destruction. Using these enhanced protocols, he transmitted termination commands across the clone network, deactivating Order 66. With the immediate crisis contained, he then broadcast the revised narrative. Separatists had constructed this terrible weapon, then in their fanatical rage destroyed Coruscant, obliterating the Republic's capital, its leader, and even their own people. The brave Jedi had secured the weapon after clone traitors, corrupted by Kaminoan programming, sided with the enemy. The fabricated account spread rapidly through official Republic channels. Anti-separatist sentiment reached genocidal heights. Their leaderless droid armies crumbled within weeks. Those commanders who fled into hiding were tracked down and publicly immolated. The Death Star, rechristened the Eye of Justice for public consumption, became the galaxy's new capital and premier Jedi temple. Surviving Jedi relocated to its vast halls, bringing their various business enterprises with them. The conspirators briefly debated formal names for their new ruling council. League of Legends and Justice League both received serious consideration, before settling on a more conventional designation. The process of transforming the Republic into their new empire began slowly with the formation of this council, officially established as an advisory body for the Chancellor. In practice, however, this council would gradually accumulate power until it ruled the galaxy directly. Without Senate oversight or ethical constraints, the Jedi Council's financial ventures expanded exponentially. Drug cartels received official religious sanction. Money laundering operations became temple-approved banking services. Construction began on additional Eyes of Justice, ensuring every sector would exist under constant threat of holy annihilation. Peace through superior firepower settled across the galaxy, enforced by warrior monks, senators, and Wookiees, all with planet-killing weapons and highly profitable criminal enterprises. And they all lived happily ever after. By the way, in this timeline, Shmi kidnapped the Tuskens.